Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Commerce Lab by Comsi, the place for everything related to Amazon FBA private label and e-commerce. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, founder and CEO of Ecomsi. Today, we bring you another special guest. His name is David Esral, and he's the founder and CEO of Epsilon Safety and Consulting. So basically, they specialize on everything that has to do with a quality control for product and testing, and that's why I think he's going to be the perfect guest for today's topic, which is basically to talk about how to deal and prepare everything that has to do with the safety and quality requirements to sell products on Amazon. So without any further delay, David, let me welcome you to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here today. How you doing?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me on, Vincenzo.
It's
I
a
really
pleasure.
appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I mean, I have seen everything. I follow your work for a long time now. Everything that you put out there, you're very vocal, or everything that has to do with the safety and quality control in the Amazon space. And I think that's such an interesting topic. And I feel it's such a niche thing that a lot of people sometimes don't know how to even find information around that. And I think it's super valuable to have you on our podcast so we can touch on this and add as much value to our audience, to be honest. Yeah.
Sure. Looking forward.
Great. So let's start with you, David. I mean, I usually like to give a few minutes to my guests to just give us a bit of background how you jump into this specific space in terms of safety and quality consulting, and then how you actually combine your long time experience with Amazon. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a chemist, and I spent many years different kinds of laboratories. I tested, if you're in a plastic factory, I tested their products, and I've been in consumer products for about 12 years. Um, and we test all kinds of consumer products, toys and clothing and shoes and cosmetics and a very larger list than I can list here. Um, but uh, part of part of part of running tests and also part of running laboratories in general, there's a quality system, which is an ISO standard that labs have to follow, and there's a lot of testing standards. Testing standards, by their nature, are very detailed. They're full of jargon, and so I had to learn how to. It's not the English we speak. Um,
Yeah.
or any whatever language you speak, the test standards are not written in your language, even if they are. There's so much jargon in there, and they have such complicated ways of saying something. Like, if I would say, take this stapler and put it down on the desk, that's how we would say that.
Yeah.
That would be like 5 steps in a testing standard, and you wouldn't know what any of them said. So I had to figure out all that. Oh, when you say this, it means that, and
I see.
that's just the jargon way to say it. And then I also dealt with all kinds of people in the when I was working in the plastic when I was working in a plastics lab. So we had a factory, and the factory people had their understanding of what we did in the lab, and I would advise them how to adjust their plastic so it would meet requirements. We had the salespeople who had their own understanding. We had the people who did the shipping and just did all the more clerical work. They had a totally different understanding, and I had to talk, or sometimes the salesman, sometimes the customer themselves, and I learned how to understand how they understood it and talk to
Mm,
them, in their language. So
that's
all
right.
of these things help me understand. There's 100 ways to look at them, to look at
I
something,
bet.
and which is the way you're looking at it. So when I got into consumer products, and then maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I don't know exactly, we started getting more and more Amazon customers. And I started seeing what Amazon's asking. I took that skill, and I learned how to understand, what is that guy at Amazon thinking? How does he view that? What is he looking for? And it's now I just do it by, without having to think too hard. But it took a little while to figure out how he would think about it. Um,
Yes.
he has his own set of life experiences, and and based on that, that's how he's looking at it. And then, of course, I have to know all the jargon and all the test
Mm.
report and all the test standards.
Yes. Yes, I totally agree. I think, I mean, first of all, that journey is amazing. I think the value you're bringing specific to the Amazon community, that's great, because I feel like when this whole issue started in the Amazon space, at the beginning, Amazon were asking pretty much for nothing, but as they start adding all these requirements in terms of testing, safety documentation, all of that, I mean,
Right.
most people was feeling so lost, because some of this wording is like you have never read a sentence in that way, and you don't know what you need to do, and you're scared. Your listing is down, your account is suspended. So I think that I'm mentioning this is going to allow us to start jumping on some of the things that I've seen lately in the Amazon space, which is, I know some people that they definitely do the testing, they definitely have all the safety documentation, but Amazon just won't accept it. Like, you send it, they don't care, they say it's not right. So I would like to hear your take in this, and how usually you have help your clients to navigate these massive issues that we see in the Amazon space. Yeah.
Right. So usually it's one of three things, or a combination of all three things. Um, a lot of times, surprisingly, the laboratories, which are typically accredited, um, and appropriate for this testing, a lot of times they just don't do everything, and I can't tell you why. I've had to even
Mm.
argue with them to convince them at times. Not my laboratory, but
Yeah.
other people's laboratories, had to argue with them to convince them, no, this is wrong. You left out this, you left out that. You can't do that.
Mm.
And I cannot explain why a lab would, go to all that trouble to test everything, charge you all that money, and then leave out. And sometimes they'll even say straight out, we did not test subsection 4.12 or 4.25. And I was like, you got to say it. Like, maybe no one will notice. No, but they got
Yes.
to say it. And so, and then of course Amazon notices, because I mean, you can't not notice it. And
Yes.
that's one thing that goes wrong. You just didn't test it properly. There are other things. It's Amazon likes. You have to understand, the many of the top people at Amazon are real experts in their field, at in the safety department, and but not everybody has years of experience. Some people have. I mean, there's so many people they need to have to do all this. I heard
Yes.
there's 2,000 new sellers a day, which I can't even fathom. But but like, someone has to go through all this stuff. So they have a combination of robots who pick out keywords and things like that. And then they have people who are at various levels of training. Some are very good, and some are very new at this. They
Yes.
they like things to be really clear. And
Mm.
we get what's called really clear. Well, that gets into getting inside their head and seeing how they see it. But if it's not written very clear, they don't know it's there. So it's sort of like an extra Amazon requirement, but it's not really intended that way. It's just, we don't know if you're meeting the requirements because we don't see it clearly yet. So everything has to be written in a way that people can that whoever you get at Amazon will understand it. And everyone's different. In fact, when I mentioned, the salesman, the production, the customer service people, um, the customers within each group, they understand things differently. Some have a deeper understanding. Some have a very peripheral understanding. Um, some people
Yes.
just want to know it's good or it's not good. That's they can't handle any more detail than that. Um,
Yes. For sure.
and,
I know.
and you have to be prepared for all those people. So
Yes.
and then the third thing is, sometimes it's just the robot lost his mind. um
Mm.
the Amazon robot is just totally out of line. I
Yeah. For
see
sure.
that less and less, though, and they do try to stop that when it happens. But that, I think they're forced to use robots just because the
The
sheer volume.
volume.
It's unbelievable how many sellers there are, how many products there are. And it's a it is a it's an enormous task to
Yes.
to monitor everything.
Yes, for sure. And I think you touch on something very interesting, which is, I mean, just be clear on when opening a case. I think a lot of people, what they do is just opening a case, just attach the files and say, hello, here are the testing, bye, and that's it. And then don't elaborate. And I think if you start into that loop, which is basically just going back and forth with the same responses and they just reply with SOPs, you basically
Right.
get nowhere, right? Which is an infinite cycle. Now, I think another important thing that I would like to bring to the table is the basically these reports that people need to have in terms of tasting and safety, right? Because the reality is some people sometimes when they're starting to sell on Amazon, they don't know where to start in terms of finding out what is the compliance around a product, right?
Right.
So, what is usually your advice in terms of somebody's getting started to understand what kind of testing they should have in hand and what kind of also safety requirements? Because the last thing that you want to happen is that you do an amazing run on your business, if sales are booming, everything, and then you get this suppression, you have nothing in your hands, and we know
Right.
testing takes time, and that's it, you're done. So, how you can make sure you have all that in hand so that doesn't happen?
Yeah. So, well, first, a lot of people just their factory says, "Oh, we did the testing." Um, if you want to rely on that, I mean, the first thing you should do is say, "Okay, please send it to me,"
Hmm.
because they say they have testing. I once got it was a doll, and the doll company said, um, it was a small doll company, but they said
Hmm.
the factory says they have testing. I said, send it to me. Let me
Yeah.
look at it. And it was a testing on a blob of plastic. I mean, I don't know if the doll was made out of that kind of plastic or not, but there was no doll there. And
Yeah.
it was just a blob of plastic, and they did some testing on it. I mean, that no one's going to accept that. That's just like, it has to look like your product, um, to be accepted. And I'm happy to look at anyone's test reports. I'll give you an honest answer. This is good, or this is not. This is not good. A lot of factories will say, "Well, we tested it for Europe. Europe is harder than the United States. So if it's good for Europe, it's got to be good for the United States." Um,
Mm,
that's not true.
yeah.
Um, in some areas, Europe's tougher than the United States. In other areas, the United States is tougher. Um, in Canada and the United States, the same thing. I have a customer. He passed for the United States for a few products, but he failed a Canadian
Mm,
flammability test. They have a different
I see.
flammability test than we have.
I
And
see.
and I have a different customer. He failed in the United States and he passed in Canada. And and and
Crazy.
it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel uncomfortable. It's like, it doesn't feel safe to me when someone's failing. But hey, that's the rules in that country. Um, and in that country, you passed.
Yes.
And there in Europe, United States, the same thing. It has to be specific to the country you need to sell in, or if you're selling in multiple countries, it has to be specific to all
Mm,
those countries.
that's very
Um,
interesting. So that ideally means, sorry for interrupting you,
sure.
that if you are selling multiple countries, you may have to need to have different iterations of the product to make sure it fits all the criteria. Because if you're not passing, it means that version of the product is not gonna pass regardless of what you do. So that means you need a different version for Canada, Europe, and so on, right?
Yeah, but well, you can usually have one version that works for everyone. But I mean, if you've already made a truckload of it or a container load of it, and
Mm,
it doesn't pass in Canada, but it passes in the United States, well, just don't sell it in Canada. But
mm,
next time you make it, we can usually guide you, what you need to do different so that it
mm,
will be good for Canada. Now, a lot of things that fail, are labeling problems.
I see.
And labeling is the easiest thing to fix because usually
Yeah.
you can, I mean, it's not cheap. If you
Yeah.
already made them and you didn't label them properly, you have to print stickers with the additional label stuff,
Mhm.
um, and slap them on every single box. But but it's doable. It's easy. It's still better than well, I have to pull off this component that has a failed chemical, has a chemical hazard in it. You can't do that. That just you just have to throw them out or figure out something. It's usually not an option if you already made something, and there's a component that has too much of a certain chemical. That's not
Yeah.
easily fixed. But to put a label on something, you could do that. It cuts your margins, but it's not a total loss, and you could still make money on it. But we would advise you, and any lab should advise you, what labeling corrections you need to make.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say you need to have a separate version. Just you need to have all the testing. Another thing about this is a lot of testing is somewhat overlapped, and if the lab knows in advance that you need to test for U.S., Canada, and let's say Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and if they know that in advance, they can design the testing where, okay, we're going to test for Europe on this test, and then that will include everything for U.S., Canada, and
I see.
Australia. If for the other test, we're going to do it like the U.S., and then that'll be good. For this third test, we'll just do it in a way that it's good for everybody, and it'll save you a ton of money. If they don't know that in advance, though, then they have to do the whole test over again.
Wow. Yeah.
And if it's a chemical test, you could have 25 components, so they may have to do it 25 times over again. But
Yeah.
if they know in advance, they so it's always cheaper to test for any country you plan on selling to in the next year at least, all at once.
Good.
It'll cost you a little bit more, usually 10-15% more, but than just testing for one country. But if you had to do it over again, it'll cost you, may cost you double.
Good. Okay. That's very interesting. Now, another question that just came to my mind is regarding when somebody is starting to think to bring a new product to market. Sometimes, if you're selling something that has a lot of materials, and depending on the category, I mean, there are so many tests that you might have to take in terms to make it compliant and have all the safety requirements. So, what is usually your advice for those people to find out what are those? I mean, the best route is usually to work with agencies like yours that you help with the process, because the reality, we just talked about this just in the previous point. Suppliers, sometimes they are not honest. They're gonna tell you you don't need the certification, you don't need this and that. But is there any portal or any way people can have at least a basic understanding, or at least using common sense to know, what, I should do testing for these products or not, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you're working with a factory for a while and you have been testing products that they make, and they're always passing, I mean, that gives you a certain confidence that they're using, that they're careful, that their equipment's clean. I don't know how prevalent this is still, but it used to be. Guys used to tell me that customers would tell me that when they would buy it, when they would work with a factory. I haven't heard this in the United States, but factories in other countries, on some occasions, the factory would say, "Well, do you want clean product, or if I can save 25 cents per piece if you don't mind having lead and cadmium in it."
Wow.
And some
Yeah.
people save the money, or they thought
Yeah.
they're saving money. They may pay out 3 times as much money. Something happens, but well, any factory that'll do that, they also may have equipment that they're running clean materials this time, if they're honest altogether.
Yes.
But the equipment may be dirty, because they just ran the stuff with all the lead in it. So
Yes.
as it runs through, a factory equipment's hot. As it runs through, the lead from the last run will wash off, wash into your product, and it's not so clean. It's just the fact that they offer that itself creates a problem. That
Yes,
means
for
they
sure.
have dirty equipment. And is yours always going to be cleaned out? It's very hard. I worked in the plastic industry, and molding equipment. It's very hard to get everything out of it.
Yeah, for
If
sure.
if you ever run a natural color after you ran any kind of color before that, a red or a black
Yeah.
or it'll run real clean, and then all of a sudden you'll see like a one little spot of red,
Yeah,
and
and that's it.
well, if it's red, you won't see it, but it'll be there too. Um,
Mm, I see what you
so
mean.
so you if you can trust your factory, that's going to make it. That's
Much
always
easier.
sometimes if it's a new factory, it may be worth it at least to pick a few things to
Mm-hmm.
send it for maybe one or two quick tests. Things that are, you know, ultimately you do have to test it at the end on the final product.
Yeah,
So you're not gonna whatever you spend before production, you're gonna have to do that over. So that's sort of a business decision. How if, is it worth it or not? But usually we can figure out a way to do that inexpensively. Um,
good. Okay, that's very nice. So now, now that you keep mentioning I mean that we keep mentioning the testing and safety and everything in terms of requirements, I bet that you have also seen the issue that your listing gets suppressed or your account, but they don't give you very clear guidelines. So what is the reasoning behind? They are not very clear. They just say this product is prohibited from selling, or you're not allowed to sell this product, and it's sometimes difficult to really find out what is wrong with your listing. So on those scenarios, what is some advice or some light you can give in terms of this is what you should do in that situation to start doing some backtracking of things that may have happened in your account that led you to that suspension of the listing and all that.
but I just well, it really depends on who's handling you within Amazon. How well they communicate. Sometimes they'll tell you a few things that may be jargon and hard to understand, but at least you know what it's, at least it says something. Um, Sometimes they just say, here, click on this, and there's a page of
I know
500 items and all the different specifications for each one of
it's a
them.
mess. I know.
It's like I don't even know where to start, and you really don't know where to start there. You might want to just contact somebody who can help sort through, because you know I I will usually know what's supposed to, what should be the problem. In fact, I often will tell customers, even when Amazon will send them a letter, and it'll list two things that are wrong. I'll say, listen, there's four things wrong, and Amazon only noticed two of them. Um, you know, for sure you got to do what Amazon said, but you're really in violation of the regulations,
Mm,
and you should fix them. At least fix them on your next run, so that next time someone asks, everything's in order. Um, but that's a difficult one. One thing to look for is, um, if you're able to see what the um, if you're selling in one country, for example, and your test reports are for a different country,
mm-hmm.
that's a likely problem. Um, if you ever say anything, that this is antimicrobial or
Mm, yeah.
anti-mold, mold resistant, that's a claim. um, I haven't clarified if it's really wrong to say that, but nobody lets no portals, Amazon, Walmart, nobody's going to let you say that if they notice it.
Yes,
Um, and just don't, unless you have like a pesticide license.
I see.
And I don't know if you really want to sell your shoes as a pesticide.
Yeah,
It goes better in the shoe department, but
for,
but
for sure.
but if you say any of that kind of stuff, I just had a guy. He swore to me that there's nothing in the listing that says any of this stuff,
Yeah,
and it said right there antimicrobial, and that's why it was pulled.
I
And
see.
then they told me, from the portal, yeah, it says antimicrobial. I was like, yeah, you know,
Yeah,
he could have just not said that, and he would have never had the problem. But he was sure it doesn't say it anywhere. Well,
yes.
look at your listing again and see if it says that, because
Mm,
that just may be your problem. We had another guy. If you sell dietary supplements, you have to be careful how you say it.
yes,
If you
it's
say
tricky. Mm.
this is going to cure cancer, well, I mean,
Yeah.
you have to prove that it cures cancer, and
Yeah.
the pharmaceutical companies spend years proving that something cures anything before they can ever
Mm,
make a claim. And if you're not up to doing that, don't say it. Now there are ways to say it, and
yeah,
there are ways to say things
in the
without
gray area, basically.
saying it. But
Yeah, exactly.
those are some general guidelines.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I think that's very useful, that tip, because I feel sometimes the issue is not actually the reporting of the safety, it's just the copy. They are making claims that just by changing the claim your listing is back online,
Right.
and sometimes it's not an issue in terms of documentation, right? Awesome. So yeah, I think the last thing I would like to start touching is around the services that you offer at Epsilon, and I think I want to make emphasis on that because I feel you're gonna make the life so much easier for so many people listening to this and having issues. So especially with compliance and all of that. So if you can just give us a bit of summary of how it usually works in terms of if you help us with the paperwork or you also do the testing, you also help with the appealing. So how usually works in essence, the consulting you offer them.
So we can do three things. We can work on a case by case basis.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon suppressed your listing or pulled your listing, and or Walmart. It could be. I mean, any portal that does this. That has 3PLs and pulls you. I work with all of them, and the and just figuring out what the problem is and solving that problem, getting it done properly. That's one thing we can do. Um, we can run your whole compliance department or safety compliance department. Compliance means other things within Amazon, but
Yes.
as related to safety and quality, that your GMP is good if you're selling OTC
Mm-hmm.
or dietary supplements. That your testing is good if you're and labeling is good if you're selling a whole slew of consumer products.
Mm-hmm.
We could just oversee that it's done properly for the right country. Everything that needs to be tested is done. And all that. We could do it like that, or if you need testing, of course we can do the testing. Um,
Awesome.
and registrations, that includes registrations, inspections. um, some people use the word inspection improperly. An inspection
Mm.
is when they go to your factory and they look at everything and say, the teddy bear's eyeballs are falling off. Um, that may or may not be a safety issue, but you still don't want it.
Mm.
You maybe not breaking a regulation, but you still don't want that happening. A testing is when they tell you meet your safety requirements, um,
I see.
and it's sent to a factory. But we
Yeah.
can do all those things and register EPR registration, CEC, which is a California registration for
Awesome.
appliances. No, we can do all those things also.
Very nice.
Just
Yeah,
like
it's basically a one-stop solution to safety and quality compliance issue, which is amazing. Very nice, very nice. Great. So how can people find you? I mean, feel free to share how people can reach out to you or your website, anything that you want like to
so,
share with the audience today.
so I'm on LinkedIn, and there one of the things about having a unusual name is you can always find me on LinkedIn. I've found people with names I've never heard of before, and then I look them up on LinkedIn, and there's like 40 of them, and I was like,
I
which
know.
one's you? And there's only one David Esral, as long as you know how to spell my name.
Yes.
Spelled right here. So you can always find me on LinkedIn and DM me. Over there, there's also contact info, a phone number, and email address, or you can just email me at david@epsilonsafety.com. I'd give my number, but it's probably too much
Yeah, that's fine. We can put all the information you just say until now in the description so people can find it and
yeah,
get the conversation going, which is great.
yeah.
Awesome, David. So yeah, thank you very much for all the guidance around this subject. I feel it's such a ample like subject that we can make like so many episodes, but I wanted to keep it short and to the point to
Yeah.
provide some value and some people can learn more about you. So thank you very much and looking forward to having the next one. Okay,
Thank you very much.
it's a pleasure. Bye bye.